Hi, guys. I am so excited to be here on Raw with Rasha, joined by Amir Yassai, who I would say uses the term hashtag Guslim the most. Him and I share the same birthday, June 11th. Go Gemini.
Yes, happy birthday. Happy belated.
Happy belated. And what I love about Amir is he's been so fierce on social media, especially Instagram. And so, Amir, thank you for being here with me today and just, sharing your journey and your story, because I think it is so important in this time. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It's an interesting time in the world, obviously, with COVID-19 and then the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of changes are happening in this world, but I think it's important that we also practice a lot of self-care and mental health awareness, because this is a lot. You don't need to digest all the news. I actually just deleted Twitter from my phone because I don't need to see it all. It's a lot of bad news.
You have such a heartfelt journey. You have your own things that you've been through. I think it's so important. So I'm going to start off by saying, when you hear the term or the words, you can't be gay and Muslim, how does that resonate for you? Because for me, I almost feel like that's a questioning on your self-identity along with your cultural identity.
Absolutely. I think that it's hard because a lot of, specifically a lot of Muslim people will want to kind of define who I am, right? So they will come in and say, you can't do that according to the Quran here, here, and there. You can't be doing this. But what they don't understand is the Quran doesn't specifically implicitly say it. It says that it's about acting on it. So again, that's another complicated issue as well, because there's this idea that you're allowed to be gay in the Muslim community, but you can't act on it, which is kind of a little bit BS, because how is that going to really work out? How can you tell someone you're accepted, but you can't ever be who you are? So that's not great, but it's actually not as explicitly mentioned as the Bible is. The Bible says if you lay with a man, you will be stoned. It's very specific. So I think in the Muslim community, it's been hard because a lot of people will try to kind of invalidate my experience. I posted something on my Instagram saying, can I be gay and Muslim? It was about my journey through shame and accepting who I am. And a lot of people were like, no, and got very upset. And it went viral and a lot of people were very upset. But I think all that shows me is that judgment is still very strong in the Muslim community. And, God says that, the prophets have said that judgment is worse than any other sin ever, even murder. So here are these people judging me, and then going and praying and fasting. I'm no different. And during Ramadan, I fasted. I love God. I have a great relationship with God. And I don't have to explain that to anyone. But the reason I talk about it and, take up space, Rasha, is because I want people to have these conversations. I think it's very important that we stop invalidating other people based on some archaic version of a religion that we're not even practicing correctly.
Already social media is so difficult for many of us, right? Especially when people are coming and attacking you. How do you brave that, Amir? Because it can be so self-shattering. I mean, your confidence, I want to say immunity to social media, but I mean, it's heartbreaking. So how do you gather that strength for yourself?
That's a great question. So actually, my cousin who I'm quarantined with was like, I was showing her some of the messages and she was like, wow, these people are DMing you and then also putting it on a public post. She's like, why are you putting yourself as the guinea pig? Like, why are you putting yourself in the line of fire? And I'm like, it's because right now I'm strong enough to deal with it. If I'd gotten that message 5 years ago when I was struggling with suicidal thoughts and depression, going to therapy, it would have been very hard for me to deal with. And the reason I take it on is because I want people to see what I'm going through. My sister manages a very popular Islamic quotes page. She doesn't show her identity, but some people have found out she's a woman. And you see these vile messages from imams, religious scholars that say disgusting things to her. And, she told me, she's like, never delete a comment, leave it there. So they're embarrassed by who they are. And I really took that advice to heart, because I was deleting some of the nasty comments and I was like, no, people need to know that everything is not perfect. Because a lot of times people see my life and they're like, oh, it's glamorous. And, he's going to parties and panels and events. It's not glamorous in the ditch. It's hard in the trenches. It's like a revolution. I'm pushing forward. There are a lot of progress. There's a lot of queer clergy in Christianity and Judaism. Islam is very lagging in that department. They're so ass backwards when it comes to a lot of things. And again, I'm not saying that what I'm doing is okay by Islam. I'm just saying this is the way that I'm practicing my religion. I'm not telling, a lot of people were like, stop advertising this. I want to make that very clear. I'm not advertising anything. I'm not telling anyone to be gay and Muslim. It just happens that I was born gay, which is I need to make that very clear as well, because a lot of Middle Eastern, Muslim people think it's a choice, which is very incorrect. Why would you choose a harder life? My life has been a lot harder. But, at the end of the day, we've talked about this off camera. It's made me who I am. I'm more empathetic by being through the ditch, through the darkness. And a lot of my friends who are Black and going through the Black Lives Matter movement have also said similar things. What you go through as a person of color, as a queer person in this country, it makes you stronger, tougher, more jaded, but also more empathetic. I mean, when you read news about a 19-year-old Black activist being not only molested, but then murdered all over Twitter, I mean, how do you move? Like, in this country, how is this happening? A 19-year-old Black activist getting murdered. I mean, it's like, how can we just pretend?
In 2020.
In 2020, not just like, this is not 1968, this is 2020. So I think, we were regularly called terrorists. When we go out with my mom who wears a headscarf, people would say they need to get screened at the airport. There's been so much racism in this country, and it bleeds into the queer community as well.
I'm just in awe of your strength. And you mentioned that had this been 5 years ago, it would have been different. And you mentioned depression and suicide. And, I've been reading about that too, especially in the Muslim community, that people have taken that step. So I want to talk to you about that when you were going through that. I mean, so was there a point where you hated yourself for feeling a certain way? And what led you to those thoughts? But fortunately, you're here with us today. So something stopped you as well. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I've answered this question many times. It's a great question. I think that when it comes to this struggle, a lot of people, when it comes to depression or suicide, people think it's darkness. They don't want to talk about it. People want to sidestep it. I know when I told my parents or friends, they were like, ooh, like, they're like, I don't know what to do with it. And I understand not everyone can carry that. So I asked for help. I got a therapist and it saved my life. And I say that over and over again. I want people to make that very clear to people. Therapy can save your life. It's not scary. It's okay to talk about depression. It's okay to talk about suicidal thoughts. Like, we are all human. People have feelings. I think in the US, we stigmatize it. And also in South Asian communities, in Persian communities, it's very stigmatized. Don't go to therapy. Oh my God, you're crazy. No, you go to therapy so you're not crazy. I think that's a huge distinction that I wanted to make. With this struggle of, suicidal thoughts, it was really hard for me because I did hate who I was. I thought I could change it. The proverbial pray the gay away. I tried that. I realized that deep down, there was always a voice that told me, among all the self-hating, doubting voices, there was always a voice that said, you're going to make a change. You're going to find your purpose in this. And I walked around, I was always bubbly. I was always the class clown. I was really good at school, but I was always very different and I never quite fit in. And I always felt like that was my curse. But you know what? That's my blessing now. People in 2020 celebrate that. They love that I can wear a kimono and dye my hair and wear necklaces and live my best life and do stand up. That's like everything that everyone hated of me in high school is what's celebrated now. And I think for a lot of people who are struggling, who are in a closet, like, however cheesy and cliche it is, it does get better and you do find your strength and you do lean into who you are and you feel comfortable in your own skin and you love yourself. I mean, it's hard. Like, I posted on social media like 4 years ago, a shirtless photo and people were like, you're brave. And some people were like, that's disgusting. And it was really hard for me to put myself out there, but that was the first step. And, even putting out this gay and Muslim thing, I'm like ready for it. I have the armor up and I'm ready to take up space and I've stopped asking for permission. I think a lot of South Asian people that I know, Persian people that I know, Muslims, they ask for permission. Can I be Muslim? Can I date whoever I want? Can I do this? Well, if you ask, someone's going to say no because that's our culture.
I think that's what I was going to add, that I think that comes from the culture because from the time that we are born, we are raised in a culture where we are constantly seeking acceptance and we want to make our parents happy and we want to make them proud. And so I think a part of that just stays with us through adulthood. And it's a lot of stress, actually, a lot of pressure because we're constantly trying to maintain that perfect reputation of meeting their needs. So I think that's where that comes in. What if someone—
With no offense, Rasha, fuck that reputation. That's what I want to say.
With you. And that's why I love some of the stuff you post because you talk about, am I enough? And it's so beautiful to see that you are owning who you are because those voids that you felt growing up, I think it's those voids that are now helping you stand in your power to be that light to other people. So you were
Thank
able
you.
to fight through that and give you that strength.
Mhm.
What about people who don't feel they can afford therapy, or what kind of
Right.
a support system can people look for?
What I realized is like Instagram is such an amazing tool. I've connected with you over Instagram. I've connected with so many other people through Instagram. I've created a community. The YMCA, once they're open after COVID, they do a lot of support groups. Look it up online. Go to meetup groups online, Facebook groups. There's a lot of opportunities for group therapy, which I highly recommend. I actually found a great organization in LA that does like Persian queer people do like a group therapy, and it was crazy because it was so nice to hear other people's experiences. If you, and this is no offense to white people, but if you go and do group therapy with many white people, they might not really understand where you're coming from, because they're a very individual culture. We're very tribe mentality. It's very different. It's like if I come out, I've made my parents look bad. And that's something that I considered. Like, they started a mob. Like, I come out, it does make them look bad, and they're gonna lose friends. And I'm sure it did. And you have to, again, I want them to accept me, but I also have to understand that there is a mourning period. There is a fear in coming out. There's all of those things. So take all of that into consideration and ask for help. You'd be surprised. There are certain friends that you might lean on, and they'll be there for you in a way that you never thought possible. And that's free therapy.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes people don't know where to go. And that's really helpful information. The fear. So you and I have talked off camera about this as well, but you knew in your teens that you were gay, but it's not something you were openly discussing. And you are now in your 30s, and you recently just came out to your parents. How have your parents been about accepting you? Because this is, again, it's still kind of taboo, I want to say, in a lot of the Middle Eastern and South Asian cultures. The parents don't really know, how to, I would say, accept it. So what was your experience?
Well, so I spent a lot of time. I used to be a swimmer, so I used to swim like 8 or 9 hours a day. So I was a little kid, and my swim coach was older than me. And I realized that when he would compliment me in the pool, etc., be nice to me, it meant more than when any of the female instructors would. And that was the first time where I kind of felt like I was different. And I always I don't want to say this because it is very cliche, but I liked playing with Barbies, and I liked being my mom's closet. But that's, again, I want to make that very clear. That's not every gay man, because that's also a stereotype. That was just me. And so I spent a lot of time feeling different, and I always felt like my parents, my sister were a family, and then I was adopted. I also my hair was lighter. I kind of didn't really look like them. So the joke was always I was adopted, but I also emotionally felt adopted as well. So that was like another experience that was very interesting. And it kind of led me to, the fact is, even when I knew I was different, I didn't have the words for it, right? A lot of people come out and they don't really know what that means. Like, they're so young and they don't really understand. So I always knew something was different. Even when I went to college, I was so religious. I was praying and fasting. I never dated. I was so religious. And then when as I started to really explore it, then I went on a date and I was like, oh, this feels right. And then, when I went to business school, I started to kind of open up, and a little separation from your parents, that helps a lot. But again, I didn't have the words for it. I had a rosy colored glasses that I had to take off and be like, oh, I'm gay. Like, it really kind of it clicked. It had a click. It was like an aha moment. And, my parents, I came out to them, and it was, my mom really, she was like, you're going to get HIV and die. And, my dad was like, is this something you can change? Is it a choice? My sister was accepting and then kind of took it away. She didn't like that I was public on Instagram, so there was a lot of support that was like, I was getting it, and then it was kind of being revoked. And, now being in quarantine with them, like, we've come a long way. Thank God they wanted to go to therapy. So we did like a family therapy with a therapist who facilitated. I highly recommend that for people who are coming out. Because the first time I told my mom, it was hard to process that. You just keep hearing that, you're going to die,
Yeah. See, and how did that make you feel, Amir? Because I can't even imagine the turmoil that's going on between your heart and your head when you're sharing this with people you love. Forget even going out into the community, right? In the Muslim community.
Right.
At that point for you, what was that turmoil like for you between your heart and your head? And how are you feeling about all this?
It's a lot, I love that you said that turmoil between head and heart. It's very true. Like, I always try to lead with my heart. I'm never trying to embarrass my parents. I'm never trying to make them look bad. It's just who I am, and I have to own that. And I've said no to a lot of opportunities. I've been offered reality shows, and I said no for their benefit, and it's affected my career. And I think I took a moment where I was like, you know what? I need to do what's right for me. And I want to take up space in a very big way. And, you know, things are happening and it's going to affect their lives. And I'm sure, you know, as more people at the mosque know, like I'm not calling everyone at the mosque and saying, hey, auntie, I'm gay. But like, you know, people know my family and they're trying, but it's not, we don't talk about it. So like, you know, since I've been in quarantine, it's never once come up, like maybe once with my sister. But it doesn't really come up.
It's been about 3 months that we're in quarantine and but does everybody just act normal? Like everything's okay?
Yeah. We just don't really, my family's a little different. Like we don't really like to do a lot of emotions. And like my dad, you know, I don't think that he ever quite processes the feelings about it. Cause he went from like, oh, this is kind of hard for me to accept to like fully accepting it. Like, let's go to dinner and everything's fine. And I'm like, we're not really talking about how you feel. Like, I want to know how you feel. And I think a lot of people that I'm sure going to watch as South Asians know that parents in our cultures, being Persian, there's a distance, right? They're like, it's like you want to be real. Like, they don't want to talk emotions. They want to just be like, are you doing good in school? When are you getting married? Like, it's just two conversations. And I'm like, we need to get deeper. Like, you know, and then I don't know, I went to a funeral once and it was a friend who's Persian and their son had committed suicide. And the mom kept saying, I had no idea. I can't believe this happened. And a lot of people, I understand that around suicide say that, but I'm like, did you really not, or did you not want to see it? Like, I think a lot of our cultures don't want to see it. Like when someone's hurting, they don't want to see it. They're like, oh, like I remember like
talk about it because, and I don't know if it's because, you know, we don't know how to talk about it or we want to just say, oh, it's okay. Everything will be okay. It'll be fine. Just get over it. And I think you mentioned a very important point about the feeling because it's through that feeling is how we heal and move past that. And it's really sad because we spend years with amazing parents and siblings and we can never move past that little guard and shield because nobody ever really talks about how they feel, even if you try to push the envelope and try to them.
I've tried with my dad. I've had these very deep conversations. I've said that instead of just saying you support me, like put it into action. Because, you know, our cultures say a lot of things like, I'll die for my kids. You don't need to die for your kids. You need to listen to them.
Right.
You know what I mean? But you push and it's just, you know, it's hundreds of years of culture. It's an archaic way of parenting. I mean, I hope that the new generation can push forward and have less sharm and less shame and, you know, move forward. So,
well, and I think you're helping with that by speaking up and letting people know. Do you feel like the relationship is constrained at all? Like, how is everything with mom? Is she fully accepted it or kind of working through that?
I think she's working through it. And I think it's like, it's hard because they also have turmoil between head and heart. Like you're in your mind, you're like, I don't want my kid to have a harder life. Like, and listen, I posted this a while ago and a lot of people were very upset and said that it was homophobic. I posted that I wouldn't want my kids to be gay. I would accept them, but I wouldn't wish for it. I think a lot of people, my cousin was like, I wish my son was gay. And I'm like, that's not a very appropriate wish. It's a harder life. I love being gay. I love who I am. I love my family and lifestyle, my queer tribe. But I think saying that you wish for that is almost on par with people that have posted that is very incorrect, saying they wish they were Black because they love Black culture. You don't know what you're saying when you say that. You know what I mean? People are misunderstanding what those things mean. So I think that, you know, it's hard for parents. They love us and they love their children, but they also don't know how to be supportive. They're like, this is wrong. And, you know, back to reputation, people are going to say, oh my God, like these two religious people, you know, and our cultures love gossip and they love putting people down as well.
Talk of the town, Amir.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are so many layers to your life because I can't even imagine growing up as a teen and then dealing with everything and then wanting to be accepted just for who you are. But now when you go into the LGBTQ community itself, I understand there's even discrimination within that. And have you faced any discrimination?
Listen, that question, I don't get it posed enough because 5 years ago, I posted about white gay privilege and people were sending me death threats and they were so angry and they're like, how dare you, we're gay, we can't be racist. There's a lot of privilege in the queer community. If you're buff and white and straight acting, which means like people might think you're straight, you are at the top of the food chain. And then everyone else comes below that. And when you go into a nightclub, people like size you up. And then if you're funny, I remember like I had a group of friends that were like, oh, we didn't really like you until you made us laugh. Like it's a lot of pain. And I always say hurt people, right? Queer people are hurt. And when they go into the queer community, they are hurt by straight people and their families and they turn and they're all of a sudden a celebrity in this community and they turn on everyone. So there's a lot of nasty messages. Grindr is a gay dating app. I've got people said, hey, terrorist. Someone called me a fat fuck. Multiple people told me to kill myself because I was feminine.
But I mean, it's so again, doesn't that like affect you mentally? I mean, your confidence and believing in who you are.
Mm-hmm. It does. And you know what it is? People are like, well, just don't let it bother you. Just block them or delete it. I don't crumble, but it's mini rejections. It's scar tissue. There's a lot of scar tissue, hence why I deleted the app. One of the reasons I partnered with the LGBT Center and I was doing live panels talking about racism and femme bashing and transphobia in the gay community. There's so many people that are still very transphobic. They're like, oh, trans people are weird, and like say things like that, or say, oh God, that guy's like such a woman. A lot of misogyny, a lot of like self-hate. There's a lot of that in the community. And I remember it's because I got this message. Someone said, you're disgusting, you're Middle Eastern, you're hairy, you should kill yourself. And I remember I sat in the middle of my living room 2 years ago and I thought, I could either let this crumble me and I could cry, or I could do something about it. So I created I started this panel and I got Grindr there, and I actually propelled them into doing a campaign called Kinder Grindr, where they started calling people out. They stopped doing, because they used to have race filters, so you could filter out races. So you could say no Blacks, no Asians. Regularly, people write no femmes, no fats, no Asians, no Blacks on their profiles.
I mean, you're like creating so much hate and I would say discrimination right there within the community.
Absolutely. But you know what, Russia, is crazy. A lot of people don't understand is that they're like, well, that's my sexual preference. Like, you can't police who I like. I understand that. Listen, you never have to date a Black man or an Asian man or a Middle Eastern man or a femme person ever. But you don't need to put it on the profile. So someone who has just come out is going onto a dating app to connect, sees that, and goes back into the closet or turns on themselves. Like, I remember I was like, if I don't lose weight, I'm going to like never be accepted. I lost 60 pounds in a year. I was eating oranges for lunch. I had an eating disorder. You like, and you look back on these things and you're like, oh, I was fine. No. Like, you were 6'2", 145 pounds. Like, that's not healthy.
Gosh, Amir, you've gone through so much. It makes me think of what support do you wish you had? Because I feel like at this point, yes, you're strong, but still, I mean, we're human. There's only a level of how much we can take. So when you look back at your journey, Amir, what kind of support do you wish you had?
Absolutely. Well, like I went on a walk with my mom yesterday. I was talking to her about being anxious, turning 34. Like, I started kind of thinking about what my life, what I had accumulated. And, the way that she can take that space on definitely wasn't there when we were younger. Like, she became a Sufi, which is a mystical part of Islam, and she's a lot more open. And I think that like, that's kind of amazing. Like, I wish I had that support system. My dad doesn't do emotions, doesn't get deep. That's just how he is. And I wish that like I was able to have that conversation and kind of have that father-son connection. But, as far as external support, like, I wish that, I had gone to therapy earlier, but, I found it when I found it. And I wish there were more Ramis and Issa Raes and people of color in the media that were taking up space. It's hard because there is a lot of white-centric shows like Will and Grace, et cetera, that there aren't people that look like me that are on TV. So I think we've come a long way, and I think that's amazing. And it's amazing that we're slowly no longer the butt of the joke. I think being gay was so funny 10 years ago, and I think now it's empowering, and I just wish that I'd seen more of that. And, it's weird, like, in some kind of ways, I always wanted to be a vet, and animals really saved my life. I had birds and iguana. It actually kind of makes me emotional because I really think that in some ways animals saved me. And I always say, if animals like you and babies like you, you're doing something right in the world.
Absolutely. And they have unconditional love, actually. That's what makes
absolutely
unconditional love. Would you say that it's easier for you to move past pain now?
I think, it's so funny because I've read so many books, and I've like done all the self-help seminars, and, I go to therapy every week. And it's funny because I've always wanted to kind of go around pain, right? I've always wanted to kind of step around it, or to avoid it, or to run away from it. I used to joke that if I moved to Paris, everything in my life would be perfect. And I remember one of my therapists was like, well, it would be great. You'd be eating a croissant, but your problems would also be there as a side dish. So I think that, what I realized is instead of going around pain, even for my birthday, I was like, I don't want to deal with all these emotions. But as I went through it and like had the conversations and owned it, it felt a little less scary. And I always say the darkest part of the night is right before sunrise. And it will eventually get better. And I always say everything good, even your wedding day ends, your funeral ends, like all of it ends, however good or bad it is, it ends. And it's like, I always remember that now when I get anxious or I feel stuck, I'm like, this will pass.
Amir, I could sit and talk to you forever. Feel like there's so much to learn about you, but I am so grateful and thank you today for sharing your journey with us, for sharing, you know, what you've gone through and continue to experience, but for also being an inspiration and being that voice to help other people. Guys, I've had his social media handle written down there, so please make sure you check him out. Very active on Instagram, and Amir always has great things to say. Thank you so much. Anything you want to wrap up in 2 seconds before we go?
Yes, I just want to say something to people who are feeling stuck in quarantine, either they're in the closet or recently quarantined with their parents. They can't be themselves. Find the space. Go in the bathroom, put on the lipstick, put on the tube top, dance around, listen to Kesha, and then leave your room. You find the space. It's there. And reach out to me or anyone on Instagram. We'll respond. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised who will respond.
Oh, I love that, Amir. Thank you so much. And thank you for being raw with Rasha.
I got you. Thank you.